Interpretation: The Historical Mirror of 1587. Introduction: The Flicker and Shadow of 1587. In 1587, the year of Dinghai in the lunar calendar, the Ming Dynasty was still half a century from its collapse. This year appeared calm on the surface, yet undercurrents swirled within and beyond the imperial court. Emperor Wanli, Hu Yijin, only 23 years old, had reigned for 15 years in the prime of youth, yet ensnared in the quagmire of power and responsibility. The chief grand secretary, Shen Shixing, toiled tirelessly to bridge the rift between the emperor and his ministers. On the frontiers, the illustrious General Qi Jiguang, despite his remarkable achievements, languished under the weight of court intrigues. In the examination halls, scholars toiled over their studies, chasing fame, unaware that the system was silently eroding the empire's foundation. This seemingly ordinary year was like a mirror, reflecting the subtle pivot of the Ming Dynasty from prosperity to decline. Ray Huang, in 1587, a year of no significance, chose this year as his focal point, and it was no coincidence. With a grand historical perspective, he examines the details, weaving emperors, officials, generals, and scholars into a single tapestry, revealing how a vast empire unraveled through internal strife. This book is not merely a historical narrative but a profound meditation on power, institutions, and human nature. It prompts us to ponder, why does a seemingly mighty empire crumble in unnoticed corners? Why do individuals caught in the torrent of history act with agencies yet remain powerless? Standing at the threshold of 1587, we can almost hear the whispers of history. The struggles in the palace, the compromises in the court, the cries from the frontiers, and the scratches of pens in examination halls, all these details point to one question: why could the Ming Dynasty not escape its fated decline? Let us step into this year to uncover the truths veiled by time, tracing the empire's veins to touch its glory and its hidden wounds. Setting the scene: cracks in a golden age. In 1587, the Ming Dynasty still bore the visage of a great power. Its treasury was full, its territories vast, its population exceeded 100 million, and its silk and porcelain were prized across the seas. The reforms of Hang Juzang over the past decade had brought a fleeting prosperity. Tax audits, land surveys, and postal system overhauls had doubled fiscal revenues. The history of the Ming records that in 1581, the treasury held 6 million taels of silver, enough to sustain the empire for years. On the frontiers, Qi Jiguang's defense of Jeju deterred Mongol incursions, while southern pirates, or woku, had been quelled through the joint efforts of Huzong Goxian and Qi Jiguang. Culturally, the imperial examination system produced countless scholars, academies flourished, Neo-Confucianism thrived, and literati like Zhu Wei and Tang Xuanzu left enduring works. Yet beneath this prosperity, cracks were forming. Hang Juzang's death in 1582 marked the swift unraveling of his reforms. Emperor Wanli's purge of Hang's family, including their confiscation and exile, sent shockwaves through the court. Reformist officials like Hai Rui and Zhu Yuanbio were demoted or dismissed, allowing conservatives to gain ground, plunging the court into factional strife. Fiscally, land survey results were undermined by local magnates, and tax loopholes re-emerged. Though the frontiers were temporarily secured, Qi Jiguang's transfer from Jeju weakened defenses. Most critically, the examination system, while nurturing talent, bred corruption, with scholars resorting to unscrupulous means for fame, fostering a restless social ethos. The year 1587 was a nexus of these contradictions. Ray Huang writes, "This year saw no earth-shattering events, yet it revealed the empire's weariness everywhere." Like a giant in the throes of a fatal illness, the Ming appeared robust but was rotting within. Political rigidity, economic vulnerabilities, and cultural superficiality wove an invisible net, ensnaring all who dwelled within it. This exhaustion was not sudden. Since its founding in the Hongwu era, the Ming had relied on centralized power and an agrarian economy to maintain stability. By the Wanli era, however, the empire's scale had outstripped its institutional capacity. Central policies, when transmitted to the provinces, were often distorted in execution. The bureaucratic system, though vast, was inefficient. The veritable records of the Ming noted that in 1587, the Ministry of Revenue repeatedly petitioned about delayed provincial taxes, only to be ignored by the emperor. This disconnect made the empire's operations creak like a rusted machine. A deeper crisis stemmed from social imbalances. Land annexation intensified, with Jiangnan magnates amassing vast estates while small farmers buckled under heavy taxes. The Gazetteer of Songjiang Prefecture records that in the 1580s, Songjiang's land rents reached 60% of harvests, driving farmers to flee in despair. Though cities prospered, they bred extravagance. Suzhou's silk industry thrived, with wealthy merchants spending lavishly on banquets featuring dozens of dishes, while commoners struggled to survive. This widening gap between rich and poor sowed the seeds of future rebellions. Let us begin in the palace, entering the world of Emperor Wanli to see how this young ruler struggled within this net. The Emperor's Dilemma, Power and Solitude. Emperor Wanli, Hu Yijin, assumed full authority at 15 and was in his prime in 1587. Once hailed by Han Juzang as a sage and enlightened ruler, he was diligent in his youth, never neglecting his review of memorials. By 1587, however, he was no longer the spirited youth of old. In 1587, a year of no significance describes him as weary of governance, indulging in pleasure, but this is not the full story. His dilemma arose from the tension between power and duty, and the clash between individual will and institutional constraints. Wanli's childhood was far from joyful. Ascending the throne at 10, he was subject to the strict discipline of his mother, Empress Dowager Cixing, and the domineering oversight of Han Juzang. He had little freedom, with even his daily routines tightly controlled. The veritable records of the Ming recount how Wanli was once scolded by Han Juzang for poor calligraphy, fostering deep resentment. After assuming full power, he sought to break free, only to find that an emperor's authority was far from absolute. Following Han Juzang's death, Wanli's purge of his family was meant to vent years of frustration but provoked a backlash from officials, with conservatives seizing the chance to attack reformers, plunging the court into chaos. In 1587, Wanli faced his greatest controversy, the succession dispute. He favored consort Zheng and wished to name her son, Hu Changshun, as heir, bypassing the eldest, Hu Shangluo. Officials, citing Confucian propriety, fiercely opposed this, placing Shen Shixing in a precarious position. The history of the Ming records that Yang Tingxiang, an official in the Ministry of Rites, boldly remonstrated, stating, "The heir must be the eldest, only to be demoted and exiled." Wanli was furious but powerless to silence the officials, as the scholarship officials, armed with Confucian propriety, formed an unyielding collective will. Behind the succession dispute was Wanli's pursuit of personal agency. He hoped to assert his authority by challenging Confucian norms. Yet Confucian propriety was not merely a moral code but the cornerstone of the bureaucratic system. Officials were not opposing Wanli personally but defending the way that sustained their existence. This conflict left Wanli feeling profoundly helpless. He once lamented to a confidant, "Though I am the son of heaven, I am less free than a commoner." This remark betrays his inner solitude and frustration. Wanli's sense of isolation grew. He aspired to be a dynamic ruler but found himself shackled by the system. Ray Huang writes, "The emperor's power was supreme yet as fleeting as a dream." He began to protest through withdrawal, reducing his court appearances after 1587, eventually absenting himself for 2 decades. This passive resistance was both a silent rebuke of the bureaucracy and a surrender to his inability to change reality. Wanli's plight was not unique. History is replete with similar emperors. England's Charles I, clashing with Parliament, sparked a civil war and met the guillotine. France's Louis XVI, unable to navigate conflicts between nobles and the populace, faced ruin. Though Wanli avoided such extremes, he was equally trapped in the cage of power. His story prompts us to ask, does a nation's fate rest in the hands of its rulers, or is it driven by larger forces? This dilemma extended to Wanli's personal life. He cherished consort Zheng not only for love but because she was a rare emotional anchor in the palace. The unofficial records of the Wanli era notes that consort Zheng, charming and empathetic, often entertained the emperor with poetry, earning the moniker the flower who speaks. Yet this private affection was politicized by officials, fueling the succession dispute. Wanli's personal and public roles were inseparable, every action scrutinized under a magnifying glass. This relentless pressure further sealed his inner world. Wanli's dilemma was also tied to the Ming's imperial system. Though revered as the son of heaven, the emperor's power was checked by multiple forces. Eunuchs, officials, the empress dowagers, and even regional powers carved up the pie of imperial authority. Wanli once sought to counterbalance officials through the eunuch Feng Bao, only to fail due to Feng's conflict with Heng Juzang. By 1587, he relied on another eunuch, Heng Cheng, but this did little to alleviate his isolation. The illusion of imperial power made Wanli a paradoxical figure, both supreme and impotent. 3. The Chief Secretary's Compromise, Shen Shixing's Balancing Act. If Wanli was the empire's emblem, Chief Grand Secretary Shen Shixing was its linchpin. In 1587, at 53, Shen had served as Chief Grand Secretary for 4 years. Hailing from a scholarly family in Jiangnan, he rose smoothly through the examinations, steeped in Confucian principles. In 1587, a year of no significance calls him a master of mediation, yet notes that his ultimately promises failed to save the empire. Shen's primary task was to balance the emperor and his officials. Wanli's withdrawal from governance clashed with officials' demands for adherence to Confucian propriety. The emperor's desire to name consort Zheng's son as heir was opposed on grounds of primogeniture. Shen sought to navigate these tensions through the Confucian middle way. The history of the Ming records that on the succession issue, he adopted a delaying tactic, neither openly opposing the emperor nor fully endorsing the officials, hoping time would yield consensus. This approach backfired. Wanli deemed him disloyal, and officials accused him of indecision. Shen's compromises stemmed from his deep understanding of the Ming's bureaucratic system. Examination-educated officials bound by Confucian propriety formed a formidable collective consciousness. Their loyalty was not to any single emperor but to the way of Confucianism. Shen knew that confronting this force would cost him his position. Yet he also understood that the emperor's would could not be wholly defied. Thus, he survived in the cracks, wielding diplomatic finesse to keep the government running. A vivid example is the capital evaluation of 1587. This sexennial review of officials aimed to weed out the incompetent. That year, however, it became a battleground for factionalism. The Donglin and Qi Jiguang factions attacked each other, and Shen's attempts at neutrality earned him accusations of muddling through. The unofficial records of the Wanli era recounts Shen's private lament, "I seek to harmonize all sides, yet all sides seek to devour me." His efforts failed to stem the tide of factionalism. Shen's story recalls another historical figure, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. In the 1930s, Chamberlain's appeasement policy toward Hitler aimed to avert war but led to greater calamity. Though their contexts differ, Shen and Chamberlain's compromises reflect the limits of individual efforts in the face of crises. Shen Shixing's compromises also surfaced in his handling of fiscal issues. In 1587, the Ministry of Revenue reported overspending and widespread tax arrears. Shen urged the emperor to order strict audits but hesitated to challenge powerful magnates. He once proposed auditing land taxes and punishing corrupt clerks, but local resistance buried the proposal. His caution was both prudent and paralyzing. Ray Huang writes, Shen Shixing's middle way was both his lifeline and his fatal flaw. Shen's personal character merits attention. Modest and frugal, he kept no concubines, a model of integrity. The history of the Ming notes that he read the Analects each morning, grounding himself in Confucian ethics. Yet this discipline did not translate into statecraft. His compromises were more about navigating reality than driving reform. This trait may epitomize the Ming bureaucracy, cautious, rule-bound, yet lacking the boldness to break through. 4. Examinations and culture. A hollow prosperity. In 1587, the Ming's cultural scene appeared vibrant. The imperial examinations drew countless scholars, academies dotted Jiangnan, and the teachings of Neo-Confucian master Wang Yangming held sway. Yet this prosperity masked a deep crisis. The examination system, while producing talent, was the root of societal superficiality. The examinations were the Ming's lifeblood. The history of the Ming records that in 1587 East provincial exams, Jiangnan saw over 10,000 candidates, with thousands from Suzhou alone. In the examination halls, scholars labored over 8-legged essays, chasing formal perfection in introduction, elaboration, transition, and conclusion. Yet the rigid format stifled intellectual freedom. Ray Huang notes, the examinations did not cultivate statesmen but exam-taking machines. Many candidates, desperate for fame, bribed examiners, and cheating was rampant. A real-life case is Gu Hianqing, the founder of the Donglin Academy. He passed the metropolitan exam in 1586 but was demoted for criticizing the court. Born to a scholarly Wuxi family, Gu harbored grand ideals in youth, but the examinations taught him that the bureaucracy valued compliance over talent. His story reflects the examinations' dual role, igniting ambition while crushing creativity. The examinations' flaws extended to their monopolization of social resources. The Ming's elite were almost entirely examination graduates. For commoners, studying was the only path to mobility. Yet the system's barriers were steep, with poor students often priced out. The Gazetteer of Suzhou Prefecture notes that in the 1580s, Suzhou Academy fees reached 10 taels of silver annually, several years' income for a farmer. This educational inequity deepened social divides. Cultural superficiality was also evident in the hollowing of Neo-Confucianism. In 1587, Wang Yangming's philosophy of the mind remained influential but had been reduced to abstract debates by later scholars. Literati obsessed over investigating things to attain knowledge but rarely addressed practical issues. Tang Hansu's play The Peony Pavilion, though wildly popular, reflected scholars' retreat into fantasy. Ray Huang writes, cultural refinement masked societal emptiness. This cultural crisis was compounded by intellectual insularity. In 1587, Europe was in the twilight of the Renaissance, with Galileo studying free fall, heralding the scientific revolution. Ming scholars, however, remained engrossed in annotating the 4 books and 5 classics, largely ignorant of the wider world. Though Zhu Guangqi later engaged with Western science, his efforts went unnoticed in his time. This cultural self-isolation left the Ming lagging in the global tide. The examinations and cultural superficiality permeated social ethos. Jiangnan merchants mimicked literati, hosting poetry gatherings and collecting calligraphy, but showed little interest in industry. The unofficial records of the Wanli era recounts a Suzhou merchant who spent a fortune on Song Dynasty calligraphy yet ignored local bridge repairs. This preference for culture over practicality further sapped the empire's vigor. Cracks at the grassroots, the empire's hidden wounds. In 1587, cracks in the Ming's grassroots society grew stark. Ray Huang notes that the empire's vast size weakened central control over localities. Taxes, corvée labor, and land annexation weighed heavily on the populace. A fictional yet plausible story may illuminate this period's grassroots reality. Hao Wenhuan, a minor clerk in Songjiang Prefecture, Jiangnan, handled tax collection. Born to a poor family, he earned a Shuke degree through grueling study but unable to afford further exams, took a clerical post. In 1580, Songjiang suffered floods and crop failures, yet the court demanded taxes. Hao trudged through villages, facing villagers' pleas with sympathy but powerlessness. The Gazetteer of Songjiang Prefecture records that in the 1580s, Songjiang's taxes doubled from the Jiajing era, with magnates evading through bribes, leaving small farmers to bear the brunt. Hao tried reporting abuses but was rebuked by the magistrate as meddlesome, ultimately resigning in disillusionment. Xiao's tale mirrors widespread grassroots struggles. Central policies were often warped in local executions. Magnates and clerks colluded to embezzle funds, yet public anger targeted the courts. Ray Huang writes, "The empire's grassroots were like rotten wood, intact on the surface, hollow within." These cracks, though not yet eruptive in 1587, foreshadowed future uprisings. Grassroots cracks also stemmed from onerous corvée labor. The Ming's corvée system required unpaid labor for public works like road repairs or grain transport. In 1587, Dengzhou Shandong conscripted thousands for coastal defenses, with projects lasting 6 months. The Gazetteer of Dengzhou Prefecture notes that many locals fled, leaving fields fallow, while officials concealed the crisis. Such scenes were common nationwide. Land annexation was another peril. By 1587, land concentration in Jiangnan peaked. Merchants and officials amassed estates through purchases or seizures. The Gazetteer of Suzhou Prefecture records one Suzhou magnate owning 10,000 mu of land, while nearby small farmers, landless, became tenants. Land annexation not only cuts agricultural output but fueled social inequity. Dispossessed farmers flooded cities as vagrants, sowing seeds of unrest. Grassroots cracks tied to the Ming's judicial system. County yamen were the core of local governance, but clerk corruption and judicial bias were rife. The unofficial records of the Wanli era recounted a Qi Jiguang magistrate who misjudged a land dispute, sparking a fruitless petition. Such injustices eroded public trust in the courts. Similar patterns appear in other empires. In late Rome, tax burdens drove farmers to flee, hollowing cities and hastening collapses. The Ming, though not yet fallen, suffered from grassroots wounds that gnawed at its foundation like a hidden malaise. Tensions on the frontiers. Qi Jiguang's twilight. In 1587, the Ming's frontier stability rested on the lingering prestige of General Qi Jiguang. Yet by this year, Qi was no longer the formidable commander of Jizhu. His fate reflects the chronic ailments of the Ming's military system. Qi Jiguang was among the Ming's greatest generals. He crushed Wokou pirates in the southeast with his Qi family army, famed for its Mandarin duck formation. For 16 years in Jizhu, he fortified the Great Wall and trained elite troops, cowing Mongol tribes. The history of the Ming praises him as brilliant in strategy and strict in discipline. Yet in 1587, Qi languished at home, despondent. Implicated in Han Juzang's downfall, he was removed from Jizhu, living in poverty until his death in 1588. Qi's fall stemmed from the Ming's military-political tensions. The Ming army comprised hereditary garrison troops and conscripts, with garrisons often undisciplined and ineffective. Qi relied on conscripts to build an elite force, but this required hefty funding. During Han Juzang's reforms, the Ministry of Revenue supported these costs. After Han's death, fiscal strains left Qi's army unsustainable. The veritable records of the Ming notes that in 1587, Jizhu's military budget was cut by 30%, leaving defenses neglected. Court factionalism was even more fatal. Tied to Han Juzang, Qi was branded a Han partisan by conservatives. After Han's fall, successors accused Qi of embezzlement, forcing his ouster. Ray Huang writes, Qi Jiguang's tragedy was his loyalty to the state, yet he could not escape the political maelstrom. His plight recalls another military genius, Francis Napoleon, whose victories were overshadowed by political exile and a lonely ending. In 1587, the frontier seemed calm but hid brewing storms. After Qi's departure, Jizhu's defenses weakened, and Mongol tribes probed with raids. The history of the Ming records that in 1589, the Tumed tribe attacked Suanda, with ill-prepared defenders suffering heavy losses. Though Wokou were subdued in the south, Japan's Toyotomi Hideyoshi was rising, setting the stage for the Imjin War. Qi's story also exposes the Ming's neglect of military talent. The examination system prioritized civil over military officials, relegating generals to lower status. Despite his triumphs, Qi never held high office. His subordinate Yu Deu similarly languished under factional strife. This civil-military imbalance left the Ming vulnerable to external threats. 7. Palace intrigues, the shadows of eunuchs and consorts. In 1587, the Forbidden City was not only Wanli's residence but a stage for power struggles. Eunuchs and consorts, as the emperor's closest aides and kin, unwittingly deepened the empire's crisis. Eunuchs played a unique role in Ming politics. Both personal servants and potential rivals to officials, they wielded significant influence. In 1587, Wanli relied on eunuch Hang Cheng for palace affairs. Sharp and capable, Hang headed the Directorate of Ceremonials, controlling the emperor's red ink approvals. The history of the Ming notes that Hang sometimes reviewed memorials on Wanli's behalf, irking officials. Wanli trusted Hang not only for loyalty but because eunuchs, unlike officials, did not bind him with Confucian propriety. Eunuch power was rooted in Ming institutional design. Emperor Hongwu, wary of consorting kin, tasked eunuchs with overseeing officials. This, however, led to their overreach. In 1587, Shang Cheng, though not as notorious as later Wei Hongshan, began meddling in governance. He privately urged Wanli to name Hu Changshun as heir, escalating the succession dispute. Ray Huang writes, eunuchs were the emperor's shadow, faithfully executing his will while magnifying his flaws. Consorting struggles were equally consequential. Wanli's mother, Empress Dowager Cixing, was stern and profoundly influential. The unofficial records of the Wanli era recounts her public scolding of Wanli for neglecting duties, leaving him ashamed and speechless. Consort Zhang, with her charm, became Wanli's emotional refuge. Yet her ambitions extended beyond affection, as she lobbied for her son Hu Changshun's succession, clashing with officials. This intertwining of harem and court complicated Wanli's decisions. A real case is the 1587 seditious book incident. An anonymous pamphlet circulated in the capital, insinuating Consort Zhang's political meddling, causing an uproar. Wanli ordered a probe, but Shen Shixing dismissed it as baseless. The history of the Ming notes that though unresolved, the incident deepened officials' distrust of Consort Zhang. While not shaking the court outright, it exposed palace intrigues. The shadow of eunuchs and consorts recalls other empires. The Ottoman harem swayed succession disputes, influencing statecraft. Byzantine eunuchs, overempowered, sparked unrest. The Ming's eunuchs and consorts, though not directly causing collapse, subtly eroded the empire's unity. Conclusion: the mirror of history. The year 1587 is a mirror of history. It reflects the Ming's splendor and decline, as well as the complexity and frailty of human nature. Emperor Wanli's dilemma, Shen Shixing's compromises, the examination's superficiality, grassroots cracks, frontier tensions, and palace intrigues together form the year's portrait. Ray Huang writes in 1587, a year of no significance. History's meaning lies not in events themselves, but in how they illuminate our understanding of past and present. The book's allure is its ability to not only recount history but provoke reflection. The story of 1587 reminds us, a nation's decline often stems not from external might but from internal rigidity and strife. Whether emperor, chief secretary, scholar, or peasant, each strove in their role, yet none could alter history's course. Does this sense of powerlessness linger in our own era? History's lessons transcend time. The 20th century Ottoman Empire crumbled under bureaucratic corruption and ethnic tensions. The Soviet Union fell to economic stagnation and ideological rigidity. The Ming of 1587 succumbed to similar internal decay. These tales teach us that only by confronting issues and embracing reform can we avoid repeating past mistakes. The flickers and shadows of 1587 have long faded into history's river. Yet 1587, a year of no significance, shines like a beacon, illuminating our grasp of history and humanity. It shows us that history's wheel rolls relentlessly forward, neither fully within human control nor wholly unchangeable. Perhaps true wisdom lies in finding one's place in history's torrent, leaving a mark whether as emperor, general, or commoner in the crevices of time.